Hi everyone, welcome to Nibble Pop. We are super excited to begin our brand new podcast series, a space where we explore the fascinating world of literature, breaking down its complex ideas, brilliant criticisms, and intriguing theories.
This podcast is all about making literature easy to understand, fun to explore, and totally relatable.
In every episode, we'll bring you insightful, relaxed conversations between the two of us, Monami Mukherjee.
And me, Shuddha Shankanak. We will take those heavy, complex ideas in literature and simplify them, all while keeping their depth and richness intact.
Together, we'll wander through the amazing maze of literature, finding how it connects to our lives today and why it still matters so much.
So grab your coffee, tea, or whatever you love. Sit back and join us on this journey of discovery and dialogue.
And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's get started. Today, we are going to be taking a look at literary criticism.
Sounds fun.
It is going to be fun. And sometimes it can seem a little bit intimidating, a little bit like you need a PhD to even understand what it is. But we are going to try and demystify it all, make it really approachable.
I love that. And I think what's great about this topic too is that everyone has some experience with it, right? I mean, we all read books and we all form opinions about them.
Yeah, so what we are doing today is just taking those natural reactions we have to literature and giving them a little more structure, a little more depth.
Like we are giving you the tools to become a literary detective.
I like that.
So you can really understand not just what a book is saying, but how it is saying it and why that matters.
So it's like less about saying a book is good or bad and more about understanding the why behind it all. Why did the author make certain choices? What are those underlying themes and messages? How does the book reflect the time it was written in? And even how does your own background, like your own experiences, influence the way you interpret it?
So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think it would be helpful to kind of like define what literary criticism actually is.
Right, because there are some pretty complex definitions.
Yeah, I mean, you can get really academic and jargony with it.
Right, but at its core, it's really about, analyzing and interpreting literature to figure out what it means and why it is important. It's like having a conversation with a book, asking questions and reading between the lines.
So it's not just about judging whether a book is good or bad, right? It's about uncovering those hidden layers and really appreciating like the author's craft.
Absolutely. And what I think is really cool is that literary criticism itself has a history.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it has its own story of how people have approached understanding literature over time.
So it's not just like there is one right way to do it. It has changed over the years with culture and ideas.
Exactly. It's like a journey through time.
So why don't we take a little trip back in time, shall we? We will start way back in ancient Greece
Okay?
with philosophers like Plato and Aristotle.
Who are already debating the purpose and value of literature.
Yeah, I remember learning about this. Wasn't Plato a little suspicious of stories? He thought they were kind of dangerous.
Well, he was definitely wary of anything that wasn't focused on true knowledge. He saw literature as just an imitation of reality, which to him was already an imitation of perfect forms. But you know what? Even Plato recognized the power of stories.
Really?
Yeah, he knew they could shape people's minds.
Wow. So even back then they were recognizing like the power of literature.
Absolutely. And then you have his student Aristotle, right, who took a more analytical approach.
Yeah, he wrote that book, Poetics.
Exactly. Aristotle was fascinated by how tragedy, with its flawed heroes and, those inevitable downfalls could evoke such strong emotions in the audience. He actually introduced the concept of catharsis.
Catharsis.
Yeah, that feeling of emotional release you get from experiencing art.
So they were already thinking about the impact of literature. You know, how it makes us feel things way back then. It's not just words on a page, is it?
Not at all. And those ideas really laid the groundwork for centuries of literary analysis to come.
So where do we go from ancient Greece?
Well, let's fast forward a bit to the medieval period
Okay.
and see how religion really shaped literary interpretations back then.
Yeah.
Lots of focus on biblical texts and finding moral lessons and stories.
Religion was a huge part of life back then. So that makes sense.
Exactly. But then things start to shift again with the Renaissance.
Okay, the Renaissance. So we are talking like rebirth, humanism, all that.
Yes, more focus on human experience and the beauty of language itself.
Okay, so what were the critics saying during this time?
Oh, well, critics like Sir Philip Sidney argued that literature could both teach and delight. It wasn't just about religious instruction anymore, it was about the artistry, the power of words to move and inspire.
Wow. Okay, so we have got the ancient Greeks laying the foundation, then the medieval period with that religious lens, and the Renaissance bringing back the human element.
Uh huh, yes.
So what happened next?
Well, the pendulum swings back and forth, and with neoclassicism in the 17th and 18th centuries, things became a bit more structured again.
Okay,
Think order, reason, clarity.
so a little bit of a reaction against all that Renaissance emotion and drama.
You could say that.
Okay,
Back to logic and structure.
makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that did not last forever.
Well, humans, we love our emotions, and along came romanticism in the 19th century.
Ah, yes, the romantics, all about those wild landscapes and passionate heroes.
Precisely, they celebrated individuality, emotion, and the power of imagination.
Okay, and that brings us to the 20th century.
Right, where things really exploded in the world of literary criticism.
Exploded?
Yeah, suddenly there wasn't just one way to analyze literature. There were a whole bunch of different approaches, each with its own unique perspective.
Okay, so less literary criticism and more like literary investigation.
I like that, using all these different tools to uncover different clues.
All right. So before we get lost in all these different approaches, why don't we pause here for a moment and then we will come back and dive into each of these types of criticism.
That's good to me. Let's take a break.
This is getting good.
It is.
All right. So we are back and we are ready to explore all these different approaches to literary criticism.
Yeah, it's like opening a treasure chest, right? Full of different lenses and tools.
Okay. So what do we even begin? Like, what is a good starting point with all these different approaches?
Well, a good place to start, I think, is formalism
Formalism. Okay.
or new criticism, as it's sometimes called. Okay, and remember how we were talking about those close readings earlier?
Yeah, like really focusing on the text itself.
That's formalism in a nutshell.
Okay, so it's kind of like becoming a literary detective, right?
Exactly.
Examining every single word and symbol and comma for clues.
You got it. Okay.
But how does that actually work in practice? Do they like break out a magnifying glass and like analyze every single comma?
Well, it can feel that detailed sometimes, but the basic idea is that the meaning of a work is contained within the work itself. So instead of focusing on the author's life or the historical context, formalists look closely at things like language, imagery, structure, and how they all work together to create meaning.
So, like if we were looking at a poem through a formalist lens, we would pay attention to things like the rhyme scheme, the meter, the specific word choices that the poet used, and how all of those elements create the overall effect.
Exactly. Like take Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven.
Okay, yeah.
A formalist might analyze how Poe uses repetition, internal rhyme, and all that dark imagery to create this really haunting atmosphere of despair and loss. And by zeroing in on those elements, they can uncover those deeper layers of meaning within the poem itself.
That's pretty cool. But what about like the world outside the text? Doesn't that play a role in how we understand a book too?
Absolutely. And that's where historical criticism comes in.
Okay, historical criticism. So this is like putting on our historian hats.
Exactly. It's all about recognizing that literature doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a product of its time and place, influenced by social norms, historical events, even the author's own life experiences.
So to really understand a book, we need to kind of like consider the context in which it was created.
Exactly. Like, let's say you're reading To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. A historical critic would really explore the Jim Crow South, examining the racial prejudices and social injustices of that time period. And by understanding that context, the story's themes of racial inequality and justice become even more powerful and resonant.
It's like adding another layer to the map,
Yes, exactly like that.
not just the terrain of the text itself, but the whole surrounding landscape of history and culture.
Perfect analogy.
But what about the minds of the characters themselves? Is there an approach that like dives into that?
Yes, there is. That's psychological criticism. And this is where it gets really interesting.
All right, I am ready.
All right. So, this approach is all about exploring the inner workings of characters and authors. It draws on psychological theories, to understand motivations, desires, hidden conflicts,
Okay.
even those unconscious impulses.
Oh, so this is where we get into like Freud and subconscious desires and all that good stuff.
You got it. Like, imagine analyzing Shakespeare's Hamlet through a psychological lens.
Okay, yeah.
You might explore Hamlet's procrastination and melancholy in light of his unresolved Oedipal complex, or analyze the recurring ghosts as a manifestation of Hamlet's repressed guilt and anger.
Wow, that adds a whole new dimension to the play. Okay, so we have got formalism focusing on the text itself, historical criticism looking at the context,
Yes,
and psychological criticism diving into the mind.
exactly.
What other critical lenses are there?
Well, there is Marxist criticism, which views literature through the lens of class struggle and power dynamics.
Marxist criticism. Ah, okay. So with this approach, we'd be asking questions like who holds the power, whose voices are heard and whose are silenced.
Yes, and how does the story portray the struggles of different social classes?
So, for example, a Marxist critic looking at The Grapes of Wrath might analyze how the novel exposes the exploitation of migrant workers during the Great Depression,
Exactly.
like the power imbalances between the wealthy landowners and the impoverished families that are struggling to survive.
You got it.
It's like using literature to shine a light on social injustice
Yeah,
and really challenge the status quo.
precisely. And speaking of challenging the status quo, we can't forget about feminist criticism.
Right, feminist criticism. This is the lens that focuses on gender roles, the representation of women in literature, and how patriarchal structures have shaped our understanding of stories.
Exactly. Feminist critics might analyze how female characters are portrayed compared to male characters, or how a novel reinforces or subverts traditional gender norms.
Okay, so a feminist critic might take a look at a classic fairy tale like Cinderella.
Right, and analyze how it perpetuates ideas about female beauty and passivity.
Yeah, reliance on a male savior.
Exactly. Or they might examine how a novel like Jane Eyre challenges those norms by portraying a strong, independent woman who fights for her own autonomy and happiness.
It's so fascinating how these different lenses can completely change how we see a story.
isn't it?
Yeah, uncovering meanings and messages that we might not have even noticed before.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of literary criticism. It gives us these tools to think more critically.
Okay, so we have covered formalism, historical criticism, psychoanalytic criticism, Marxist criticism, and feminist criticism.
We have.
And are you telling me there are even more ways to analyze literature?
There are.
Wow, okay.
And the next one we are going to discuss is called post colonial criticism.
Post colonial criticism.
Okay, and it kind of takes us into the realm of global literature and the complexities of cultural exchange.
Okay, let's dive into that. But first, let's take a quick pause, all right? And when we come back, we will explore post colonial criticism and a few other mind bending approaches that will really expand our understanding of how to analyze literature.
Can't wait.
Okay, so you are back and ready to jump into post colonial criticism.
All right, let's do it.
Can you give us a little bit more detail on what that actually means?
Well, it basically looks at literature from regions that were once under colonial rule and examines how those experiences like power, identity, and cultural clashes are reflected in the stories they tell.
So, we are talking about the impact of colonialism, the legacy it leaves behind, and how that shapes the literature from those places.
Exactly. Like, think about a novel like Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe.
Oh, yeah.
A post colonial critic might analyze how the arrival of European missionaries disrupts the traditional Igbo society and how that leads to a loss of culture, identity, and ultimately the tragic downfall of the protagonist Okonkwo.
So, it's really about understanding those power dynamics, right?
Right.
How one culture is imposed upon another, and how that tension plays out in the literature.
Exactly. Post colonial critics might also explore how authors from formerly colonized regions reclaim their own narratives, like blending traditional storytelling with Western literary form.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about analyzing the impact of colonialism. It's also about how authors are kind of pushing back and creating new hybrid forms of literature.
Absolutely. It's all about recognizing those complexities of cultural exchange and how they show up in the stories we tell.
Okay. So we have covered formalism, historical criticism, psychoanalytic criticism, Marxist criticism, feminist criticism, and now post-colonial criticism.
We have.
And are you seriously telling me that there are even more ways to analyze literature?
There are a couple more.
Oh my gosh.
It's a whole world out there. So these next two we'll discuss are called structuralism and post-structuralism, and they get a bit more abstract and theoretical.
I am ready to have my mind bent a little bit. What is structuralism?
Well, think of it like this. You're looking for the underlying structures, the hidden patterns and codes that make a story work.
It's like being a code breaker in a spy movie.
Oh, I like that, right?
You are searching for those hidden messages within the text.
Right? Structuralism draws a lot of inspiration from linguistic theories.
Okay.
And it looks for things like recurring motives, binary oppositions like good versus evil or light versus dark,
Right, right.
and systems of meaning that operate beneath the surface.
So, for example, how would a structuralist approach a classic fairy tale like Little Red Riding Hood?
Well, they might point out the binary opposition is at play, like I said, good versus evil, innocence versus experience, nature versus culture.
Okay.
And by identifying those underlying structures, they can shed light on the story's deeper meaning and how it reflects those universal human experiences.
Okay, I am starting to see the pattern here. But what about post structuralism? How does that differ?
Well, structuralism is looking for those fixed structures, right?
Right?
Post structuralism comes along and says, hold on a second, meaning, is that stable? It's fluid, it's multiple, and it's always shifting depending on the context.
Hmm. So post structuralists are kind of like the rule breakers of literary theory.
In a way, yes, they love to challenge those fixed meanings and question the idea of a single definitive interpretation.
Yes.
And to do this, they might use a technique called deconstruction.
Deconstruction. What's that?
It's basically a way of exposing the contradictions and ambiguities within a text, showing how it might actually undermine its own apparent message.
Okay, I think I need an example. Can you deconstruct something for me?
Sure. Let's take a novel like Art of Darkness by Joseph Conrad.
Okay.
On the surface, it seems to be a critique of European colonialism in Africa. But a post structuralist might deconstruct that interpretation and point out how the novel also reinforces racist stereotypes and ultimately upholds the very power structures which it claims to critique.
Wow, that's pretty mind blowing. So it's not just about finding a meaning, it's about recognizing that there might be multiple and even conflicting meanings at play.
Exactly. Post structuralism is all about challenging those assumptions and recognizing that meaning is always being constructed and reconstructed in the act of reading.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
I like that analogy.
There is always something more to uncover.
Right?
Okay, so we have covered formalism, historical criticism, psychoanalytic criticism, Marxist criticism, feminist criticism, post colonial criticism, structuralism, and post structuralism.
We have covered a lot.
And we have one more to go, right?
We do. And it's a big one. Reader response criticism.
Reader response. Okay, so this one puts the focus on me, the reader.
Exactly.
I am intrigued. Tell me more.
So, reader response criticism or reader response theory acknowledges that there is no one correct interpretation of a text because each reader brings their own unique experiences, beliefs, and background to the reading process.
Okay.
So, meaning is created in that interaction between the reader and the text.
So it's like saying a book is a mirror reflecting something different to each person who looks into it.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Oh, thanks.
So, for instance, one reader might find The Catcher in the Rye to be a coming of age story about teenage angst and alienation,
Right.
while another reader might see it as a critique of societal hypocrisy and phoniness.
Okay.
Both readings are valid because they reflect the individual reader's interaction with the text.
I love that idea. It makes reading feel so much more personal and engaging.
Right.
It's not just about what the author intended, but it's also about what we bring to the table as readers.
Exactly. And that's what makes literary criticism so fascinating. It's not about finding the one right answer.
Right.
It's about exploring different perspectives, asking the right questions, thought provoking questions, and really engaging with literature in a more active and meaningful way.
Wow. We have covered so much ground today, from formalism to post structuralism to reader response criticism. It's amazing to see how many different ways there are to approach and appreciate literature.
And the best part is you don't need to be a literary scholar to use these tools. The next time you pick up a book, try looking at it through one of these lenses, and you might be surprised by what you discover.
That's such a great point. It's not about memorizing a bunch of theories, it's about being a more curious and engaged reader.
Exactly. So, to all of our listeners out there, no matter what you're reading, remember there's a whole world of literary criticism out there to help you dive deeper and find those hidden treasures within the pages. Happy reading, everyone.
Happy reading. Did you enjoy today's podcast? Would you like us to continue this as a series? Let us know in the comments. Your feedback helps us refine how we present literature to you. Thank you for your support. We appreciate you all.